So my name is Joseph Levison, Master Joseph Levison. You hear about titles and all that jazz. I've been fencing since 2015 September, so this is my 10th year in the SCA doing historical fencing. Thank you. Rapturous applause. Wow, outstanding. But for the most part, I like to think that I'm pretty decent at what I do. And the whole reason that I'm pretty decent at what I do is because I have a good practice and I had good people around me showing me what a good practice was and reinforcing the good practices for me when I had no idea what that meant. Now, I find myself here 10 years later, and I'm on the SCA Rapier list reading a post from a lady called Illador, her mundane name is Monica, talking about the Road to 20, which is the reason that I'm doing this here today. The Road to 20 is an initiative which seeks to get more female representation in the Order of Defense and seeks to really help people who are not assigned male at birth attain the Master of Defense title, right? Specifically, Monica was talking about what a good practice looks like and how you can have a good practice and what those kind of steps are. And the entire time I'm reading through the post going, yes, this is just what a normal practice is. I don't really think this is something that needs to be publicly talked about. Like, doesn't everyone kind of have this background? And I made the mistake of reading the comments, and I realized that no, nobody has this background. Nobody actually gets full of this stuff. And I just happened to be lucky and grow up in an area where there were just good practices. So I figured I would put together a little class to show everyone what they can do to reframe their practices to make them more productive and to make them better sensor overall. Now, starting with that, we have to first define what a good practice is, right? I'm going to keep saying good practice. We all have to level set and be on the same level when we talk about what that means. A good practice can be defined in one of four ways. You can either go to practice to socialize, you can go to practice to exercise, you can go to practice to have historical interpretations and discussions of fencing, or you can go to practice to pressure test move sets and practice the actual fighting part of the art, right? We are going to be focusing on that last definition today because that is the piece of practice that is unique to a fencing practice. I can go exercise at a gym, I can socialize at a bar, and I can go to that same bar with a bunch of my nerdy friends and talk about interpretations of historical fencing over a nice couple of cocktails. But the only place that I can pick up a sword, stab another human being, is at my local practice. Unless I want to get the cops involved. That hasn't worked out well for me so far. So, we've established kind of what a good practice is. Now, how do we have a good practice? A good practice is, as we've already stated, pressure testing ideas, fighting, fencing, doing things, polishing your skills, right? How do you get to that point? How do you do that in a productive way? The first thing that you have to keep in mind is that your practices have to be specifically focused. They have to be focused on what you are trying to do and what you are trying to accomplish. It's all well and good to go to a practice and talk about Capoeira and work through the plates in sequence, but you are never going to get good at specific styles of fencing by just walking, doing a plate for 10 minutes, and another plate for 10 minutes, and another plate for 10 minutes. So the first thing that you have to conceptualize is that your practices are for development and for actually getting better at using the sword, not for theory crafting and not for drilling. Now, that leaves sparring and pressure testing. Practices are comprised of two main things. You are doing two things in a practice. You're either sparring and pressure testing, or you are learning a new idea. The split between those items should be 70% sparring, pressure testing, 30% new ideas, learning, figuring out things with oversight, with other people. So 70% of practicing. What does that look like? First of all, it doesn't have to be, oh my gosh, I have 3 hours to practice, I'm going to take exactly 2 hours and 10 minutes to practice my knees, and the rest of the 48 minutes are going to be practicing my wands. My recommendation is, if you go to 4 practices a month, do 3 practices of knees, 1 practice of wands, right? So, practicing your knees. This is a relatively simple thing to do. It's something that all of you can do right now. Practicing your needs can be as simple as picking a specific item and saying, this fight, I want to focus on doing this specific thing. For example, if I'm fighting Celestria, I will walk up to Celestria and I will say, hey, I really want to get better at my distance practice my disengage block while fighting with it. And I want you to try to shut down any action that I do that involves my disengage. If Celestria agrees, I will then proceed to defend Celestria 10, 15, 20 battles to see what's working with my disengage, what needs further improvement, and so on and so forth. At the end, I will talk to Celestria and I will say, hey, what do you see in my disengage that I could have done better? This is important to do yourself because if you are not guiding your own practice, other people will guide your practice for you. Everyone loves to be very helpful. I personally will walk up to people in practice and say, hey, I noticed this thing, can I give you feedback? My entire newbie career was accented by people walking up to me and telling me how I was fencing wrong, telling me what I was doing was incorrect, and telling me how I could do it better, which oftentimes ended up me having to unlearn that thing that they taught me later on down the line, because I had actually learned it correctly the first time around and everything was just getting jumbled. You have to be in charge of your practice, and the easiest way to do that is to walk up and say, this is what I want to do, this is how I'm going to do it, I will ask for feedback from you after you fight. Practicing once is very much the same thing. When you're practicing your want, you will go to a person that has the requisite information, or you will go to a person that you think is of equal understanding of the material as you are, and you will work through that specific thing. Say, for example, that I want to pick up Capifera, and I want to get better at Capifera, but I'm having a really hard time interpreting a specific plane of Capifera. I will then go to Brett, who knows nothing about Capifera, and I will say, hey, I know you're interested in Capifera. I'm interested in Capifera. Let's have a conversation about this specific plate and see what we can come up with. People are going to crowd around, and people are going to try and interject with their opinions. If someone who knows something about Capifera walks over, or someone who you think is very knowledgeable about the team walks over, please listen to me, by all means. We're a society, we hand out our knowledge for free, that's what we do. However, if you feel like you don't want that to happen, make sure to stop at that point in time and say, hey, we're just trying to do an interpretation, we're just trying to work through this specific thing, and then politely ask them to either not comment or just say that they can watch it. Again, taking charge of your own practice in order to make sure that you are getting what you need from your practice. Incidentally, your practicing of needs and your practicing of wants is something that is going to change over time depending on what you're working on. So, my recommendation, and this is a recommendation, you don't have to take this, is if you're going to your practice every single week and you are fighting everyone at your practice, you are likely not having as productive of a practice as you could. When I was shiny new, I would go to the people that could beat me, which was everyone, and then I would fight them and they would all beat me. But not all fencers are created equal, and not all fencers are showing up to a practice in order to learn and get better. Say, for example, I'm at a practice, and I'm not really in a headspace to teach that day. I might be at a practice just to fight, just to go through the motions, just to hang out, not really trying, not really in charge of my own development that night, right? I would not be a good person to fence that night if you were seeking to develop. What I mean by this is you want to talk to people who are actively at your level or a little bit better, who are interested in having a conversation with you after you get done practicing, right? So if I'm shiny new off the street, I might not go up and fight Simon, because Simon might be busy with 10 other people that night who are all at developmental needs where they're talking about micro motions and half a step forward, is that optimal in this situation? Simon will be dealing with people who are far above the ability of where I'm at. I might get more benefit out of walking over to someone like Alexis and saying, hey, I'm having a lot of trouble with my carry 4. Could you just show me some carry 4 items? And could you just work with me on carry 4 for a little bit? Because yeah, it's all well and good. I could go fight Simon, and let's say Simon's in a bad mood and he could just beat up on me all night. I wouldn't really necessarily learn anything, and it wouldn't be good fights for me because I would just lose ad nauseum. I want fights that are more representative of where I'm at that specific point in time, and fights that would actually feel a little bit better and be more developmental from that standpoint. So, yeah.
You're working on something specific. You might pick up
that I will be getting to in a minute here. But before that, summarizing, basically the skills you already possess are needs. They are skills that you should be seeking to refine, and eventually you will not be practicing these skills as much, or practicing them becomes second nature, such as footwork and tempo. Your wants are bigger ideas, things you don't know, that you're trying to learn and get better at. Eventually, over time, your wants will become needs, but wants are more exploratory, and you're more feeling out, trying to find new information, trying to find specific answers to problems. Whereas your needs are the fundamentals that you have right now, and it's what you're comfortable practicing and you're actively seeking to accomplish. Your wants will eventually become your needs, but that'll be a slower process. And then additionally, I have a couple of other tips that will these are just facts of the matter. These are things that will make you better in a shorter amount of time than someone who goes to one practice a week. And that first one is, if you are going to one practice a week, you will improve until a certain point. You will get to 50% of a good fencer, and then you'll fall. Because you'll be fighting the same people week after week. You'll get into a habit. You will not be fighting different people. You will only be fencing once a week. You'll only be picking up a sword for a couple of different companies. You have to have more time behind your sword. And if you don't have other practices in your area, you can substitute that with drilling. You can substitute that with slower. You can substitute that with video review. But if you can swing it, a second practice a week is going to help you improve faster, and it's going to bump you up to 75% of a good fighter. And then the rest of that will have to be solo work and drilling and technology and those kinds of items. Additionally, as Celestria was saying, if you are working on a very specific thing, it is oftentimes beneficial for yourself and a newer person to work with them on that specific thing. Not only is it useful for you to kind of explain what you're doing, but if I'm practicing my disengage and I'm fencing Brett and I'm just leagues above Brett, like he can't even touch me in practice, so I'm basically in charity work helping him, right? If that's the case, I will walk up to Brett and say, hey, I'm working on a thing tonight. You want to spar a little bit? I won't necessarily tell him what I'm working at, because that could be himself independent of the thing. But disengage is a great example. I used to do this all the time when I was fencing people who were a little bit below my level. I would walk up to them and I would say, I want to spar, I'm working on my disengage. The rule that I would have in my head is that I would not be allowed to strike the other person until I successfully disengage out of the parry that day. So I will make practice more challenging for myself, and I will make artificial limitations for myself in order to get better at the thing that I'm working on. So that even if I'm at a practice where I might be at the top of the crowd level, I can still have developmental lessons with me, and I can still develop better than if I was just picking puppies the entire night and doing whatever I wanted in one shot. So, then, yeah, that was it for those three. So, questions?
There's a high practice fencer at my practice, and sometimes I can't tell them what I'm working on. How do I double check that that's there to help me? Sometimes I feel like I'm going to them and their goal is just fight. They don't care. I don't know how to.
My recommendation is that if you don't know if they're in like a developmental headspace or they're willing to develop, just don't fence them. It serves you no purpose to just lose on repeat to people who can just beat you on repeat, especially if they're not giving you key tips, they're not helping with your development in any way, shape, or form. If they're just beating you up in a practice, that's not helping you. All it's really doing is making your practice a little bit worse. You're losing all the time you want to lose, even if it's just a practice. Consequently, if you're on the upper end of your practice prowess-wise, your goal at your practice shouldn't just be to go and win your practice. If you're winning practice, you're not helping develop anyone, you're not getting better, these aren't getting better, no one is getting better if the higher prowess of that practice are just picking up the ball. Just don't fence them if you're not sure. Otherwise, you could try to have the conversation with them, but some people don't take kindly to that, so I would just say don't fence them. Fence people who are a little bit better than you, that are willing to actually sit down and talk with you, and go through the developmental work.
You figure out that by having that big conversation.
Yes. So you either have that pre-conversation by saying, hey, I'm working on exactly that same script. You walk up to anyone in society and say, hey, I'm working on this thing. After we get done fencing, could you give me some pointers on it? And you have that conversation, and all they do is beat you up, and then at the end they go, hey, you're like getting it, like, you know, you could just use a little bit more time. Make a mental note of that, and do not fence them the rest of the time. Because it's not going to be good for your development. They're just out doing practice. It's not really going to be that helpful, right? Now, I want to say, sometimes, and it's okay to have those kinds of practices where you just show up and all you want to do is move your body. You don't really care. You're not really looking to do better at anything. On those nights, even putting on the mask and picking up the sword is a victory, right? There's a quote from some sports guy that I forget, where basically he says, the days where I didn't want to get out of bed were the days I learned the most, right? That remains true for fencing. If you ever have the days where you're going to have them, you just don't feel like going to practice, you don't want to go to practice, you think about skipping, go anyway, and just fight. Even if it's only a few bouts, even if you only work on a couple of different things, and you can just go and fight, and that's fine. But just keep in mind that those aren't necessarily good for your development, but they are good for just getting out and doing the thing, and getting more time doing the thing, and feeling how your body works. So, that's all I've got for this last joke. That's all I've got for the actual at-practice section. Those are mental tricks, those are ways to frame your practice in order to make your practice good. The next thing I'm going to talk about, which is the second piece of practice, is your at-home drilling and what at-home drilling is good for versus your practice. So if your practice is good for pressure testing and learning new things, your at-home drilling is good for the exact opposite of those things. It's good for reinforcing what you're working on and practicing movements to get more comfortable with them. That's what all of your drills should be focused on. You should not necessarily be looking at a book at home trying to figure out new movements to do. My recommendation was, if you're going to do that, you might as well just text another fencer that you know that's interested in that topic and ask them what the interpretation is, or just watch video instead. It can be helpful to sit down and read through the books. My recommendation is that should be part of your 30% exploration at practice. You should be doing that with other people, trying to do interpretations, because those books were meant to have two people against each other. So trying to do everything by yourself just isn't going to be fun. Like, it's not going to be fruitful at the end of the day. You're just going to frustrate yourself. Now, there are exceptions to that rule. If you have a full-size dummy, if you have a roommate that also fences, then you can do that kind of stuff at home. But that's still part of your 30% of exploratory stuff at practice. It's 30% the wants part, and it's not necessarily something you should do. Your at-home practice should be used for refining your fundamentals, refining what you have, and figuring out how to do things in a way that is efficient for you and good for your body. So, for example, the ways that you can do these items, and generally how these things are working, is that you will spend the majority of your time at home going over basic movements. You will spend the majority of your time at home watching video of yourself fencing in order to pick out your specific strengths and weaknesses. And you will spend another majority of your time at home theory crafting how to beat other specific opponents and then drilling those specific movements. So, video review and theory crafting are the two that I think are very foundational and should comprise about half of the amount of stuff you're going to do. For example, let's say I'm fighting Justinian regularly at my practice on a weekly basis. Justinian has this really good low line shot where he always tags me in the right side, right on the inside that kill pocket, and I have no idea how to beat it. I bashed my head against the wall 9 times last time, trying to fence Justinian, trying to figure out how to beat him, and I just can't do it. One of the first things I will try to do is I will try to get video of myself fencing Justinian. A good place to do this is at your local practice. You can either have a room cam, which is done at Stevens Point. Quinlan does it. She posts room cam footage, or you can ask that specific fencer to film those specific fences. Of course, they're allowed to say no. If they say no, be respectful and At that point, there's not much you can do but try to find very similar fences that do similar things, or just work with them and have them explain it to you at So, video review is a lot easier if you have a system to review videos through. I don't mean like an actual electronic system, I don't mean like YouTube or anything like that. What I mean is, if you have a way to analyze a fight, you will get more value out of the video if you don't have a way to analyze a fight. I'm going to put a plug in for my other classes. I teach a quadrants class and an area of excellence class, both of which are based off of epee books that were written by world champion epee fighters, gold medalists at the Olympics, which I will teach probably at some point later down the line. But moral of the story is you need some kind of analysis system to understand what you're looking at, to be able to pick out your strengths and weaknesses and your opponent's strengths and weaknesses. So, for example, this is the part where I would pull up some modern Olympic fencing and have us analyze it. However, there's no projector here and I don't want to make you watch my phone. So, let's say we've got two fencers out there. If everyone could turn. We've got Ethelina in the pink and Brigitte in the chain. Looking at these two fencers, we can see in real time that they both like to play this range game. They're both shooting their range at each other. And they're both very trepidatious. Neither of really wants to go in. But we saw in that last exchange that Brigitte threw out her sword at range and Ethelina came under the sword in the tank. Now they're both playing this range game again. They're trying to stick each other from a distance. And it makes a success overall. So, let's pretend that we're analyzing this video and that we want to beat Ethelina, right? What can we figure out about Ethelina? Ethelina tends to be poking at range and taking steps backwards, right? So if Ethelina is poking at range and taking steps backwards, we know that the things that we have to work on to beat Ethelina will be trying to get around or through their sword when they poke at you, trying to not fall for probing shots as Ethelina is probing in, and trying to get closer to Ethelina so that when she takes those steps back, you're able to close that distance much more effectively. These are all things that you can take into account when you're watching the video, and once we know that about Ethelina, we will then take a look at Brigitte. We will try to figure out how Brigitte is effectively getting around these circumstances, right? Brigitte might be using their superior range. Brigitte might be closing the distance and trying to infight. Brigitte might be baiting Ethelina to throw an attack and then have Ethelina run in on her so that Brigitte can then stab her, right? So, like I said, it's a lot easier if you have a system of analysis in order to look through these items. What I would say is that Ethelina is a reactive defensive fencer, and the way that you exploit a reactive defensive fencer is that you get them to commit to a forward action, which takes them out of their comfort zone. That means nothing to any of you. That was my last class. That means nothing to any of you right now. But I can look at that, I can visualize that, and that makes sense to me. So my recommendation, and I'll be available after this if anyone wants to have a short rundown of the quadrants class, my recommendation is to pick a system that you are comfortable with, pick a framework that you're comfortable with, and analyze video through that framework, and keep notes off to the side if you can. Just writing it down will help you. Yes?
If you're super duper into that video,
You will have an idea, but you will not be able to intuit it unless you watch video. When you watch video, you'll be able to see, oh, I'm more defensive. I tend to back up when I fight a lot of people. Oh, I'm more aggressive. I tend to run people down. Oh, my blade, I really like to throw it out there and try to play range, or I really like to muscle downwards and then come in and like try to go for draws or short thrusts, right? So, you're going to be able to intuit that. You're going to be able to see what your strengths are by watching your own video, but you're not necessarily going to. So my recommendation is, at your local practice, ask every person, hey, would it be okay if I just took video of our fights? I want to review it later. And then sit down and watch that video, watch it at half speed if you want. You will find out a lot of interesting things about your fencing just by sitting down with no real framework. However, once you want to get better, you're going to have to start seeing it. So take as much video as you can and review that video at home. Try to take notes if you can. Try to take notes per fight, right? The next thing, and the thing that everyone is going to emphasize to everyone, is drilling, right? Drilling is something that we all have to do, and it should take up half the time you spend doing any fencing work at home. Now, I have a very loose, nebulous definition of drilling. Drilling, in my world, is anything that you are doing that involves a sword in your hand at home that is vaguely developed. That means one of the things that I could do is pick up my sword and just swing it back and forth. Because what I'm doing is, when I do this, I'm getting used to how my arm is moving with my sword, getting used to the weight of my sword, and getting used to how the sword swings in place. A great rule of thumb is drill 5 minutes a day. If you do nothing but pick up your sword and swing it around like this for 5 minutes a day, you will be surprised. You will get better. You won't get much better than if you do a focused and practiced drill, but you will get better because you'll be more used to moving this sword. You'll be more used to taking these stresses. You'll be more used to feeling how it feels when you bring the sword back around your head and what that does to your elbow and shoulder. You'll be able to move that sword in space more efficiently. You'll be able to control it a lot better, right? However, drilling is not just swinging a sword around willy-nilly and hoping for the best results. Drilling should be divided between your feet and your hands. You should practice these items separately, but you should combine them for specific drills. What I mean is that if I am going to stand up and do a drill that mainly involves my sword, I want to plant my feet. I want to practice the extensions without moving my feet. And then I want to wait 30 minutes to an hour, give my brain time to separate those two items out before I practice just my footwork. Now, there will be times when there are exceptions to this. For example, when you start to combine these two things together, you will have what I call the beat drill, which in modern epee is called progressions or is called the clicker drill. How this works in modern fencing is that your coach has a clicker and you are doing footwork, random footwork that they are calling out, and when they click, you are attacked, right? So I will start, and before I even start, I will write down, I am going to take 3 steps, lunge, take 2 steps backwards, lunge, and then I'm going to do an off compass. I'm going to step offline and do a compass, just to move my body, right? And then I will randomly, within that set of motions, have a YouTube video in the background that plays a random beat every 30 seconds or so. And when that happens, I will thrust with my sword and reset. So for example, if I take 1 step, 2 step beat, lunge, pull it back, 1 step, 2 step, lunge, 1 step, offline beat, right? That's how we'll combine those movements together. You want to work your hands separately from your feet because these need to work independently from each other in order to keep fencing efficiently once you're out on the tournament field, right? Your hands should be able to move separately from your feet, and they shouldn't necessarily be tied to your feet. However, you will want to blend them together at a later point in time, but practicing them separately will lead to each of them getting better and being able to function separately from each other. Now, we're going to get to a very fun portion of this class, which is called the dummy portion of this class. So I'm going to go over a couple of different fencing dummies that we have, how to use them, how to install them. If you have a sword, you should probably go grab one, because you're going to want to feel some of these, and you're going to want to get used to some of these, right? The first sword I'm going to start with is the dot drill, and I'm going to give you a couple of drilling games that you can play with the dot drill, and these are going to go up in price as we go. So, for the dot drill, all you need is your sword-shaped object. This could be a dowel, this could be a PVC pipe, this could be a stick, and you need a little bit of tape. Very simple what you're going to do. You're going to take this tape, you're going to fail to get the tape off the roll, you're going to realize you were picking at the wrong point, and then you're going to go to the right point and not fail to get it off the roll. I'm going to take my tape, I'm going to rip it off the roll, I'm going to take my sword, I'm going to put my sword in my forehead, I'm going to face a wall, I'm going to drop into stance, and I'm going to slowly walk forward until I hit the wall. That's not level, that's level. Wherever that tip is, I'll put a little dot. Now I'm going to keep doing this, and you're all going to watch me do this, because this is how I pad out the time. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do the exact same thing with my chest. I'm going to drop into my stance, I'm going to walk forward. Oh my god, look, that's where my tip hit. So, coincidentally, I left a little mark on the wall with my sword, so I don't have to keep them. Now, I've done this 10,000 times, so I can make this dot drill from memory based on my own body. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that, so you don't have to watch me walk my sword into a wall anymore. And I'm just going to show you the generic structure of what this dot drill is supposed to look like, right? Alexis, I need nails. Alexis, the tape hates me. Yes, teamwork makes the dream work. All right. The next one is going to go into my right shoulder pocket. The one after that, if it wants to rip, excellent, will go into my left shoulder pocket. Now, these two dots are very important. This dot represents my right shoulder pocket. This dot represents my left shoulder pocket. If you'll notice, when we're fencing, we don't stand like this, we stand like this. If you look at this center line right here, this right shoulder pocket is closer than this left shoulder pocket to my center. That's not how I have this set up. This dot being closer to this center and this dot being farther away is indicative of a left-handed fencer. If this shoulder pocket on this left side is closer, that means that this person is technically standing like this, because this shoulder pocket is closer to this center line than this shoulder pocket is over here. Ergo, this way that the dot drill is set up is for a left-handed fencer as my opponent. And then my last one, people debate the usefulness of a couple of these dots in our school, and I generally think that this is the last useful dot. This represents gut and lower. All this represents is anything below your ribcage, right? Some people put one for gut, one for groin. You can customize further from here. If you really want, and what I would recommend is you put a cross of tape through here as well. Just something to help you connect all the dots together. Do I do legs? I do not do legs. Generally, when I'm doing the dot drill, I don't like doing legs just because I don't really shoot for legs all that often. You could do legs if you want to. It's just one of those deals that I never really found a lot of value in, so I tend not to make dots for the legs. The dot drill is really easy, and the dot drill is all about playing games. This is what you do when you want to practice your sword work. All I'm going to do with my dot drill is get to a range, and I'm going to hit a dot. And I'm going to reset, and then I'm going to hit a dot. I'm going to reset, and I'm going to hit a dot. I'm going to reset, I'm going to hit a dot. So on and so forth. The value of the dot drill comes because it teaches you point control. It teaches you to aim with this sword, and it teaches you to hit targets accurately. The second development that the dot drill allows you to do is it allows you to attack online and maintain a parry. So for example, if I'm going to stab this center line right here, I just did the fastest, most efficient line. But let's say I really want to practice my counter punch parry fork, where I parry fork and then attack. All I have to do is move my hand into a parry fork position from here while keeping my tip on the dot, and this is what it should feel like in combat. Then I can reset and I can do the exact same thing. It'll help me visualize what it's supposed to look like. I play a variety of games with my dot drills. I've done the most amount of touches in 30 seconds. I used to play a game that I still play on occasion called the 100 Suck. 100 Suck is a terrible game that I would recommend everyone do. You have to hit a different dot in sequence, and you have to do 100 touches, and if you miss one time, it resets. And you go until you hit 100 dots, different in time, so you can't just hit that center dot constantly. You have to change what dot you're hitting each time. And you go until you hit the dots 100 times. It sucks because inevitably you will think. You will just go a little too fast. You won't be thinking, and you'll do that. And while technically this would kill a normal mortal man, this is not hitting this center die, and therefore you would have to restart it. So, this is a very simple, very cheap, very easy drill to do, and it's something that if you do this 10 minutes a day, every single day, if you just play 100 sucks every single day, you will be more accurate with the rapier, you will be able to aim, and you will be able to snap to those different positions very, very easily. And remember, this one is forehead, this one is chest, shoulder pocket, stomach. You can always add a throat, you can always add a gut, you can always add a groin, you can always add 2 legs if you prefer. So you can always improve this dot drill with whatever targets you want to hit. But this is the cheapest one. That roll of tape cost me like, I don't know, $10, $5, and I use it on my sword still. So it's multi-use, right? The second drill is a drill that I came up with in college because I watched all these rich kids with their fancy fencing arms and I got jealous. I felt a burning hatred for all these Nepo babies with all their fancy shit. So what I did is I decided I was going to build something that could be used in a dorm that I have lovingly started calling the pole boy. Mainly because I was having one when I built this the first time. So my pole boy here is just an arm with a target that you can put books on to weigh down. You put it on a tabletop and you can practice a variety of different things. So, for example, I don't have a table here. It's really bugged. I have a bunch of chairs. Doug, you look table-like. If I'm standing here, I put my pole boy up on a waist-high table, it will keep me honest. If I thrust here, and I decide that I'm just going to keep walking forward, I'm probably going to get hit in the face, right? That's what's going to happen. But a pole boy is great for practicing your disengages, practicing pushing something offline before you take that thrust, and it's really just a nice little fantastic thing to put a guard in front of whatever you're trying to hit at an off angle so you can't just straight thrust it because you'll be taken offline by a dollar. It's just a great visual representation. This po' boy and that po' boy, both together, combined, were $21. That does not include the saw, and that does not include the power drill that I used to make this. All these are 1/2-inch dowels. I had only a 3/8 drill bit, so I drilled a 3/8 inch hole and then I shaved down the dowels so they would fit. And a tennis ball with some siding wood. That's it. This is something that I just came up with in a blind fit of rage, all right? I need you to understand that the pole boy was built out of spite, and if you build your pole boy correctly, mainly this angled shoot right here, if you can angle it a little bit more, your pole boy will hit you if you mess up, which is a very vital thing to have in today's game. So, this is something you can do. Additionally, what you can also do is from your ceiling, you can hang a string with a washer, or a ping pong ball, or a tennis ball. You can make that swing back and forth like a pendulum, and you can try to get around this stick while avoiding the string and still hit this ball. That's another way that you can work on it in order to improve your reflexes, improve your targeting, just vast improvements to drill. This is a fun little thing that you can do. My favorite thing to do with the po' boy is I will practice what I call my beat into a thrust. So I will beat this stick to get the po' boy to shift over like this before I'm keeping my sword sticky and then thrusting into the tennis. It's a movement that eventually trains that action, and it's very good use of the po' boy. Additionally, I will be raffling these po' boys off, both of them, at the end of this, to 2 of our lucky class goers here. And I will also be raffling off our last boy here. This is a recent development that I definitely did not steal from a HEMA YouTuber that you probably have all seen. But they had a really good idea, and I think that they're using that idea very well, and I wanted to incorporate this as well. This is a bike repair rack off of Amazon. It comes in a couple of different sizes. This is the 80-pound bike repair stick. Very, very simple. Very easy to use. You've got 3 or 4 different dials on it that all do different things. I've also got the 60-pound one over here. Everyone is welcome to come over and try them today. I will be raffling this one off, but that blue one is my personal one, so I'm not be getting rid of it. So, you could walk away with it, or I could just pass you the Amazon link and show you where that's supposed to buy, and it's only $40. So this is the most expensive dummy that I have. What's really nice about this specifically is that this provides resistance that the pole boy can't provide. So when you pair this up with a dot drill, what you get is a sword that fights back with targets in the background that you are supposed to hit. So I need someone's sword, if someone can be kind enough to get the sword up. What this pole boy, what this arm does is it does not heal easily like the pole boy. I am pushing into this thing and I can't really get it to move. What this also does is if I don't pair it correctly, I am going to get stabbed in the mouth. So make sure you're using a mask if you use this drill, and make sure you're using a courgette. So, what you can do with this that you can't do with a pole boy, you can beat it. It'll take beats a lot better, especially if you weigh down these bottom ones here or tie it to something on the bottom. It'll take beats and it'll come back online so long as the base doesn't move. Because what you can do is you can tighten this little screw back here, and this will make it so this doesn't turn as much, right? Additionally, you can raise this, you can lower this, you can make this point down, you can make this point up. You can change the tension this way and this way to make it more resistant. Yes. How tall can this get? Yeah, okay. I was hoping someone would ask this. This gets Simon hand level tall. Just saying. I actually said that the first time I opened this up. I was like, this is about Simon hand level height. This is about the tallest it can get. But you all look at this and you might laugh, but this is preem. This is preem. This is Simon's preem. You can practice still hitting a deep target here on Simon while avoiding his preem. So, again, this is something that I think truly is indispensable, and this is something that I think, when combined with a dot drill, when combined with a hanging ball that moves around from your ceiling on a string, I think this arm here is probably one of the better ways that you can individually drill by yourself and get cheap and affordable resistance to the strikes that you are trying to use on another living opponent at some point. So, with all that said, we now reach the end of our class. The end of our class is focused specifically on long-term goals and how to set your long-term goals in order to monitor yourself and make sure you're getting better defensive, right? There are two ways that you can do long-term goals. The first one is the hardest one to do because it involves winning tournaments. The first one is training for a tournament. Making the schedule for training for a tournament is something that is difficult, but it is a way to focus your practice. My advice for you in that regards is, let's say the sleeve is happening at 12th night. Hey, what do you know? The sleeve is happening at 12th night. That is 2.5 months away, right there. Right? 12th night's like the 15th, it's like what, the 7th or something today? I don't know the date. Let's just call it 2 months. The sleeve is 2 months away from 12th night. If you go to 2 practices a week, that's 16 practices. That's a lot of time to train. If you go to 1 practice a week, that's 8 practices. That's not as much time to train, but it's still pretty good. So, if I'm going to 16 practices, my plan would be to add 1 or 2 new things to my repertoire for 12th night, and then focus on refining and polishing my fundamentals. And what that'll look like is saying, I need to do better at my disengagements. I know I'm going to be fighting person X, person Y, or person Z, right? Tournaments are overall not a fantastic way to actually gauge fencing progress, turns out. Because anyone can show up to a tournament, and anyone can be at any level at a tournament, and I could show up with a broken leg and not do very well, even though I'm a great fencer. Simon could show up and be half machine and be an amazing Terminator fencer, right? So, tournaments are not a great way to measure progress, but it's a great way to define your training, and it's a great way to set yourself into that training mindset. if you're training for a tournament, you can say, I want to train my basics and I really want to polish them up to get as good as I can for an actual tournament to make sure that I have the most opportunistic way to win a tournament. And then what you do is you pick 2 or 3 good things that you know you do well, and you focus on making those your game plan for that day at that tournament. And that's what you focus on for at least half the time you have for training. So in the 8-week scenario, 4 practices. In the 16-week scenario, the 16-practice scenario, 8 practices. The second one is making an individual development plan. And this is an individual development plan that I do on the car ride to practice every time I go to a practice. I go, okay, tonight, this whole month, I decided that I was going to focus on my footwork to really improve my footwork. What are the specific goals I'm hoping to achieve with my footwork? Am I aiming to make my double step faster? Am I aiming to make my offline steps smoother? Am I aiming to make sure that I can kind of get deeper in my footwork and rock back and forth, right? To really work my quads here and make sure that I'm actually stable and doing things correctly. You have to pick those individual goals, and you then pick your sub-goal in the car on the way to practice. So I want to get better at my footwork this month. I am going to focus on making sure I use my footwork more actively at practice. Tonight, I'm going to do that by double stepping more often. And if I can do a clean double step 3 times, I'll consider tonight a success. Have your practices framed in this mindset and keep track of this in a notebook. And you will see results. You will see improvement over time. All right. Without further ado, that's all I had planned. Any last questions before I begin the Rapier process? All right, excellent. I need someone with paper. If I forgot my note cards on my desk at home, note cards, that's even better. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, pick a number between 1 and 30, write your number down, and then I'm going to pick a number between 1 and 30, and that's how we're going to raffle these items out. Okay? We're going to go one at a time, starting with the 2 po' boys, and then going into this. Before we get too far into the raffle, now is your chance to play with the dummy, to test it out, to kind of tweak on it. It could be going away forever.